Teachers who regularly get invited to high school reunions. What are the most amazing transformations, common patterns, epic stories, saddest declines, etc. you've seen through the years? I sat beside this girl Joni in grade 8. She was so smart and really pretty. She would always finish the year with like 95 averages, even as high as 98 in some subjects. I was a hooligan, that's why I was seated next to her. She would help me with stuff, always let me copy her homework, peek at tests. There's no way I would have passed without her. The teacher would always say you'll never get anywhere if you just copy Joni all the time. She works the drive-thru at A&W now, has a herd of children with some skeezy looking dude who's in and out of jail. Breaks my heart when I see her. So much potential to end up flipping burgers, I always wonder where it went wrong for her. 8 of my 438 student graduating class, 2009, have passed from opioid overdose. The reunion is this July. Former student who was a decent kid who tried, just not the brightest. Graduated, got a job at Whataburger. Got fired because he kept showing up late. His manager was his mom. My husband graduated from a fancy prep school. Literally over 90% of his class are lawyers and doctors now. To his parents' disdain, my husband became a professional poker player. Whenever he goes to reunions, there's a circle of these super successful doctors and lawyers around him because they'd rather listen to his stories. The ducks that graduated my year of 2001 tried to organize our 10-year reunion in 2010. Not really a surprise, but the guy who used to bully me all the time is basically homeless. He refuses to go back to his parents. Absolutely nothing wrong with them. He just never got out of the rebel teen phase and spends his nights either couch surfing at a mate's or sleeping on the streets if no one can take him in. Any job he gets he stays at until he has enough money for whatever he wants at the time and then quits. Skates all the time and wants to go pro, but spends all his time smoking weed and drinking, then crying about how his life doesn't go anywhere. People at the reunion were astounded that he had just not changed one bit. He still used the slang he used back then and even tried to get his old mates to tease me like they used to, but they didn't because they are all adults now with jobs and some even have kids. He was kicked out of the venue because he tried to pick a fight with the guy who laughed at him for how he was dressed. 30-year-old man dressed as a teenager. Not a teacher, but I went to my 10-year reunion. Back in high school we had a kid who has Asperger's and was a little weird. He was, however, amazing at the yo-yo, having picked one up during middle school when we had that yo-yo trick assembly. After everyone else had stopped walking the dog in 8th grade, this guy was doing more and more elaborate tricks every day during lunch. He was bullied and teased, but he continued doing what he loved. So, at our 10-year reunion, people from every strata of high school popularity was there, including this guy. He was his same old self, but more confident. I asked him if he still yo-yos, and he busted out his custom-made titanium yo-yo that he said he made on a CNC lathe. He then starts to do some tricks and a large crowd gathered around. It was quite the show. He had gotten very good. When he finished, people clapped and cheered, and even the jockeys dudes from back in the day fist bumped him and told him how bad he was. The most amazing transformation was everyone else. Nobody teased him for being who he was anymore. They now admired him for being so passionate about something. I'm a middle school teacher of over 10 years, so some of my students are high school and college graduates at this point. I'm happy to say that a good number of them have reached out to me to share life stories and updates. The one student that comes to mind was confidentially suicidal from a broken home with identity issues. She came to me for help and we found spoken word poetry as an outlet for her emotions, anxiety and discovery of self-worth. She is currently returning to school to finish her associate's degree and she was the first in her family to graduate HS. I get updates from her on my birthday each year. She still writes and performs spoken word poetry in her spare time. In high school I was pretty good friends with a guy that was a bit overweight, about 6 feet 4 inches, really smart and a bit nerdy. Lost track of him after high school but saw him at our 10-year reunion. He was the talk of the reunion. Still tall, lost all the weight and was in great shape, had long hair like Fabio and was a doctor. He showed up with a beautiful wife. He gave us his contact info and invited us to Atlanta to stay with him in his huge house. After the reunion I tried to get in touch. Contact info didn't work, and through some sleuthing I found out he was neither married nor a doctor. He was still in good shape. Can't fake that, but faked everything else. A frustrating thing as a teacher is not being able to remember all the kids you've taught. I've taught roughly 150 kids a year for 15 years, so it becomes hard to remember specific things about every student. I feel like a D-bag when a kid who really enjoyed my class comes up and asks me questions about life for the class she was in and I can't remember much about it. I've found that I usually remember high-achieving creative students or kids who were badly behaved, as I have a soft spot for these kids. Since I usually remember the badly behaved kids, I have noticed that most of them figured it out by the time they reach 30. Most have great jobs and are well adjusted. Conversely, many of the high-achieving students end up dropping out of college and are working low-wage jobs. I don't believe that high school is much of an indicator of future success. As long as you graduate high school and attempt college, how you performed in high school will not be that important. Used to have this one kid in my art class in senior high who treated it like one of those easy to pass classes. He was a big guy, much bigger than the other students, and he'd use his size and strength to bully other kids, the smaller ones. He was a little underneath it all. He would draw guns and crosses in his art book with pseudo gangster sayings like live by the gun, die by the gun, and duck the police. You get the idea. Come reunion time, which was some 5 years later, he's found a girl who really reined him in and, kind of like a hunter taming a wolf, really turned him into a good man. They had a baby boy, and he's a responsible father and does yoga on the rocks by the beach. Complete 180. I do think he was a good guy underneath it all. He just needed direction from someone who could break down his walls. I'm late to the party and will get buried, but here goes nothing. Not a teacher. Well, technically I am. But this is a story from my reunion. But at my school reunion everyone from my class was doing as well as or better than could be expected. Except for one guy. Let's call him John. At school John was a smart kid. Well-mannered. Pretty quiet and taller than anyone else. We were actually pretty good friends at the time, but lost touch after a while. This was before social networks. I know he went to university to study computer science, and the last thing I heard about him was that he had gotten married and had 2 kids. Anyways, I was looking forward to seeing him and finding out what he was up to for the past 15 years, but he didn't show up. Later the teacher told us that she tried to contact him, but no one knows where he is. He left one day to go to work and never came back. No bodies have been found. He hasn't contacted his wife or sister. He simply vanished into thin air. I tried finding him online numerous times, but to no avail. I still try from time to time. I just hope he is safe and well. I went to an all-girls boarding school. This one particular hostel supervisor had been working there since she was 22 and has been there for nearly 40 years, so she has definitely seen a lot. Our school's foundation day each year is attended by over 500 alumni. Some friends and I were chatting with her when this group of incredibly smart and intelligent women come up to her. After they greeted her, she told us that she never thought they would get anywhere in life. These girls were the most notorious of all the kids that she had to deal with. They chopped off a teacher's waist-length hair and stole teachers' cell phones only to bury them. Put on the janitor's uniform to sneak out of school. Got fake blood and put up handprints outside the rooms of 9 and 10-year-olds. Decided to summon spirits in a hostel building right after a visiting academic died of a heart attack. The rest of the girls in the hostel building were so scared that the school decided to lock down the building for nearly 5 years. They also took turns to stand on top of one of the buildings with a white sheet and showed it to kids in the farthest building. That's how we got our infamous resident school ghost. They all are in their late 20s now. Great jobs abroad, but looking at them you would never think they could pull something off like that in their teens. I didn't go to my 20th, but saw the list of dead people. I tried to look them up in my yearbook, but shockingly, every single one of the 7 to 8 people were in the no picture section, which was maybe 5% of the class. So either the yearbook cast a curse, or there's some correlation between not being able, not wanting to take a yearbook picture and dying young. Not a teacher, but interesting nonetheless. The valedictorian of my graduating class lost his full ride to state college after 2 quarters because of drinking and drugs. He grew up in a protected and very strict household. Once he left and got exposed to the temptations of life, he didn't know how to handle it. Last I heard, he's working odd jobs and is bumming around our hometown.